am just so honored to have you here, Erica.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I loved your book. This
Yeah.
is a fantastic book. On the shelf there, it's my book. Like I have
Oh, yeah.
this crazy, it's like a choose your own adventure style book about an
Mm.
insurance agent acting like a secret agent, but
Oh,
I
fun.
made it gender neutral because
Uh-huh.
after years of being in sales and sometimes working for Fortune 500 companies, I was just so sick of how it's still so about gender roles.
Very gendered. Yeah, particularly in the roles, not only in how we're perceived in the office, like I deal with this every day and I've got to see it from both sides, but in what we expect from women, the emotional labor that comes with your role in the office, even when it's not in your job description, everything from, hey, will you take notes or plan the party or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. Or even, I don't know, there would just be extra competition, it
Hmm.
seemed to me, especially as a salesperson.
Of
If you
course.
showed up already very confident or seemingly confident, and you've showed any success over anyone else, whether they're a woman or a
Hmm.
man, there would be just this extra. And then the management would always poke and pit us even more against each other and kind
Yeah.
of use that. And it's okay.
Yeah.
This is not fun anymore.
Yeah, I have been near sales a lot in my career because I usually needed to be as a person in tech or in consulting, needed to be near like, here's what we're going to do for you. Here's what you've asked us to bid on. But being directly in it, no. And I'm so grateful because yes, I've seen it up close from a very near outside observer, and it was not a pleasant space.
No, it's not healthy. It's not,
No.
yeah. But on that, that's what I love about your book and a lot of your messaging when you're on other podcasts and putting yourself out there on LinkedIn. I love how much you are advocating for authenticity
Yeah.
and how even when it's super difficult for us, you're trying really hard to be resilient yourself and it
Yeah.
help cheer others to be as resilient as they can be as well and give advice as to how they even find that within themselves. So I know
Yeah.
it's extra challenging these days. So what new stuff do you have to share? New
It is
enlightenment.
super challenging right now. Yes, you're correct. Whether it's because you're in an industry impacted by what's happening in the federal government, maybe you're consulting. By the way, we have federal government in every state in the union. So when we're cutting jobs there, we're cutting jobs in every single state. A lot of people don't have that awareness. Whether you're a company that's had DEI rolled back because it's become unpopular with the current admin, or maybe that hasn't happened, but the consistent thing I've noticed in since all of this is that the general stress everybody has all the time right now, right? And it's consistent across the trans people I know, obviously, because we're in the worst kind of spotlight. I have a wide circle of friends that work in a variety of fields, and they're all like very stressed and very worried, from regulations to economic worries to their retirement worries to just like changes in the environment inside a company. And I think that the thing that I have for you in terms of new insight is just that: recognize that your peers, your coworkers, your neighbors are all going through it. And most of them are probably going through it in some way right now, honestly.
Yeah.
And that what we need to focus on is checking in with our community as a priority. So I make a habit to, if I haven't heard from someone in a week, I'm like, hey, how are you? How are you holding up? How's your job going? How's the environment? How are you feeling about it? And that's across the spectrum of people that are trans or queer or cis or straight or white, black or brown. And by and large, what I get back is some sort of sense of that's really hard, but then gratitude that someone reached out and said, "Are you okay?" I'm so glad that you checked in with me. Also, how are you doing? It's usually what follows up, right? So I get a chance to talk about my worries and fears, of which I have plenty. So I think it's that building our community, checking in, because unfortunately, one of the outcomes of this may be that we need to rely on those people in our lives, not just for an emotional check in, but to provide mutual aid. We don't know what's going to happen with the economy. We don't know what's going to happen with the legal system. And by building those networks, understanding what's happening in your neighborhood and your county and your city is going to help you weather what may come much easier. That's the thing that it's not necessarily a trans issue, right? Or a queer issue, but it is an
Right.
everybody issue.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Find your people and stick with them right now.
Yes. Yes. And your people. So I am a pansexual woman in an E&M world. And so I'm lucky. I'm very fortunate. I have this gorgeous, loving lady friend, and I have a fabulous, amazing, supportive life partner.
Uh-huh.
And my people can be anyone who's actually an ally, super supportive
Yeah. Yeah.
to exactly all of my friends and what my friend Yolanda calls the alphabet gang.
Yes. Yep. That's like
and and that's important to recognize too. There's that birds of a feather flock together thing.
yeah.
Sure. But I think also we need to remember that it's okay to color outside the lines. In fact, if anything, right
Very
now,
much
we need
so.
to reach out as much as we can. And I'm saying this with a little asterisk going down to a little footnote saying, but make sure to take care of yourself first or as well. And that's something that
Yes.
I have a feeling you and I have in common where we're so good at reaching out to others. We're so good at uplifting others. I'm really good at making other people gain confidence and feel great about themselves. And
Hmm.
then I am not as good at taking care of myself. And I will deplete
Yeah.
myself of energy so fast.
Yes. So let me go back to where you started with that
Sorry.
prompt. No worries. Yes, as a member of the Alphabet Gang, let me just be very clear for your audience. Trans woman, pronouns she, her, queer, right? Maybe pansexual, I don't know, but queer in a long-term relationship with the person who is my best friend. Basically, I was thinking about this on the driving home from work yesterday. I don't know why my brain just flies off into little fantasies, usually when I need to escape the real world.
Yeah,
And I
I'm
was
good at that.
thinking, yes. And I was thinking,
Well done.
like, if someone told me you could have all the next week off and do whatever you want, what would you do? I don't know why this thought popped in my head, but all I could think about is I just want to go home and hang out with my best friend, who's my wife and my lover, and just spend the whole week together doing whatever we want. And it like there wasn't a need for me to go and be by myself or find time. And so while that sort of also tells you a little bit more about me and my partner, it also means usually when I feel like I don't need personal space, it means I'm taking care of myself, right? I have also like you, I give a lot and I can deplete myself easily. So I have a job that's in financial technology that keeps me busy. I have a tween at home. I have adult kids from my first marriage. I have grandkids. We have a wide social circle across every spectrum of diversity that there is, basically. I volunteer my time. I sit on the board of a LGBT equality county level thing. So I'm always busy. And then, of course, you see me out here speaking and talking. So I stay pretty busy. So
Yeah.
the thing I'm always on guard against is what about me?
Yeah.
What about me? I'm really good at trying to find a little bit of time every day just for me. Because
Good.
while I'm an extrovert, I also need to recharge. I'm like an ambivert. I
Yes.
love people. I also love alone time. And so it's finding that little bit of time that keeps me going. And for me, there always has to be some kind of interest separate from everything else that I'm pursuing, right? Because
Mhm.
that really recharges me. And if it's creative, all the better because I started out my career as an illustrator, right? And in my day job in technology, I do no creative work whatsoever. And so having those things to take care of myself are important. having time to sit down and chat with my wife every day, like, how was your day? Here was my day. What went great? What was difficult? What are our travel plans? What are we making? Taking time to make dinner together, like that time with her is what really recharges me. It is when I start to fantasize about alone time for just me, that's like my signal of, hey, it's been a while since you've checked in with yourself. And that's my personal like warning sign. Or if
Yeah.
I find myself outside of stressful situations feeling stressed, then that's a sign that I haven't invested in me. And I think learning those habits and skills has probably been one of the best things I've done in my life to improve my quality of life. Because as a person who always wants to show up, I also have to show up for me.
Yep. 100%. Yep. Absolutely. And I think all of that hard work that you've done in the past has required a lot of practice to get to this point where you've got a better routine and a better awareness.
Mm.
Because I know from my personal experience of going through a divorce as well, it's like when I chose to start
Difficult.
my life all over again, it was like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
time to take care of myself.
Mm.
And that felt really weird at first. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
We, yes. Love that you mentioned this. And here's a place where looking out for ourselves and also being trans intersect. I think we all struggle with feeling guilty about investing in ourselves and putting ourselves first. Oh, if I'm putting myself first, I'm not being kind or loving or a good friend or a good coworker. And yes, you should invest in those things. But if you don't invest in yourself, how are you going to do those things? And we allow our sort of drives that we've been given maybe by our parents or by society to force us to leave ourselves out. And so there's this feeling that it's like being selfish, right? I feel like that's where you were going. And it's not selfish because taking care of yourself isn't robbing someone else of something in a way that's selfish. Because if you can't show up for them anyways, because you have nothing left to give, then it really wasn't selfish. And
right.
then when you're a trans person, sorry, runny nose
It's
from
okay.
Colin, you really have to work through that idea because you're doing something incredibly personal where you have to prioritize yourself and you have to make decisions that are the best decisions for you. But because of how society and has taught us to view trans people, it comes across as being very selfish. I'm your parent. How could you do that to me? I'm your friend and I don't know how this feels. It feels very selfish. And if I am needing to go through this process to be authentic in myself and put that person in the world, then I've got to focus on me. That doesn't mean I can't bring my partner with me or bring my family with me or bring my friends with me. But at some point, my life depends on making those decisions that are urgent. That's not selfish. And I think
And
as this, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as the kid on the playground, I was like that tomboy who was taught by my
Yeah.
older brothers how to beat up boys. And,
Yeah.
I stood up for people all the time. I always stood up
Yeah.
for other kids, whether it was my sister or the fat kid or whatever. And I just said, I feel that person coming back up going, yeah, and who are you to call somebody selfish for doing what they think is being their most authentic? They know it, not just think, they know it's being their most authentic self and doing the best they can to take care of themselves. Who are you? Like, how selfish are you that you think that you need to tell them what to do with them, with their body and with their identity? And
Yes.
I get so frustrated with that. I just, I still don't get it. I still don't understand how
Mhm.
people have such huge, passionate say. They think that they have
Yeah. Say,
privilege and a right to tell somebody what to do with their body. And gosh, that goes a long way too, right? That goes to women's
yes.
health rights, trans rights, all that stuff. It's
Yeah. Bodily autonomy is an intersectional issue across all marginalized communities, right? At the end of the day, a driving factor in racism, in sexism, in misogyny is that someone else feels they have the rights over your person, over your body, over your choices, and that you don't get to make those, they do. And It's always been wild to me to hear people be so strongly opinionated and feel the need to come to me online and tell me who they think they am when they don't know me. They've never
Right.
met me. They've never met me in person. If they did, they would just see someone who's very outgoing, very happy, will crack a joke, will give you a hug, like that's happy in their lives. And if your worldview requires you to rob people's happiness, then that's not really my problem, is it? And it is this ultimately, I think when that happens to me, while I don't like that at all personally, the thing that I see it is that this other person is really acting out of their own kind of childhood, right? In that here's a person who has such a narrow and such a controlled view of the world that they feel it is their job to tell someone they don't know how to be and who to be and the way things works because seeing me is too threatening to the order in their system, right? Granted, certainly hate's involved. I'm not saying that's not, but there's always a part of me that's what happened to you for you that to be your opinion. And I know quite a few people have that handed to them from who they associate with, maybe from some versions of religious organizations, certainly from the government right now. But I'm always like, why? Why aren't we
Right.
supposed to be the nation where like you are always rooting for your neighbor and like we work together? But I think the other factor here is we always have to admit the idea that when it comes to people stepping out of the norm, basically what the group has decided what the norm is. There's not a norm. It is what our culture has collectively come to that kind of makes it that, right? There's
Yeah.
no biological imperative that says gender must be expressed this way or that, right? Those are all
Right.
cultural norms.
And historically speaking, it's a very short-lived norm too.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
new.
Comes out of Western Europe and puritanicalism and all of that. We don't have to like really take a whole sort of left
Right.
turn into
But
that.
I think it's
But
good to acknowledge that.
yeah,
This isn't like ancient, no,
no.
you
And we
know,
take a look at indigenous cultures over the world, not, I don't want to say uniformly, that's not the right word, but by and large, they recognize multiple genders beyond two or recognize and enable people living their life as their true gender. Like we see that. When we look back to the rise of the church and the takeover of what is now Western Europe, UK, and eventually the US, every major pagan holiday they co-opted, right? They slowly came in and enforced this very narrow view of religious conservatism and patriarchy that we all just carry out and thinking like that's the way it's been.
right.
And the reality is that a system of belief has come in and co-opted every other system of belief to force it onto its tracks. Trans people have been around for as long as effectively humans have been around.
Yeah.
We see incidences of it in nature as well, right? Like it's not this wild new thing. It's been going on for quite a long time. And I think at the end of the day, what I run into is this idea that me being who I am is so threatening to you who feels like you got to say something to me, someone you don't know. Why does me living my life like cause that reaction? Why are you threatened? What does it mean about you and your world that you can't tolerate seeing me walk through the grocery store without making a comment? What? When did this, I would say, when did this become our society? But it has always been our society for quite a while. But
I think it's been exacerbated. I think it
of
didn't
course,
used to be so much part of the society. And I think there's been some politeness that's been disintegrated with time.
sure, I think it's been lost.
And I think, yeah, there's been some flames fans and
Yes.
empowerment in the othering
Certain rhetoric. Yeah.
instead of the other way around. And it's, back to your happiness statement. If you feel that you need to rob other people of their happiness and that you feel that's your purpose in life, how unhappy are you? Maybe that's again, take care of yourself first. Don't worry
Mhm.
about other people so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, especially about hating other people. Maybe try to find that love deep down inside that maybe is
Yeah.
cold has gotten cold over time, and warm it up, start loving yourself first. And then if you truly are loving yourself and truly happy, it's going to be pretty hard to hate other people. And doesn't that
I
feel
agree.
better?
Yeah. I, I how if you are truly looking out for yourself and truly loving who you are in your process of becoming something more through whatever method, right? Whether it's just life has full of hard knocks or whether you're on some sort of growth path or whatever, then you're not going to be really bothered by other people. I think at the end of the day, a lot of this is rooted in discomfort with self. So when I see something that makes me feel uncomfortable in myself, I don't know how to deal with that. So I externalize it and I put it on other people. And of course, in this sort of world that we've come into over the last 20 years, where you have access to everyone in the globe via social media, we have this stuff expanded and it takes off. And I just feel like, how do we get to a place where, as a group of however many people in America voted for where we are today, that was what they wanted, that they want to embrace a lifestyle of hate. What does that get you? What is that? How do I impact your life? Other than I'm a reminder of, hey, check in with yourself. How am I not maybe being my best self? That's all that I am, is a reminder to be a little bit
Yeah.
better and to choose authenticity, whatever that is for you.
Braved the change that you needed to
Yeah,
be your true self. And a lot of people are scared as
that's scary.
hell to stand
Well,
up for themselves.
yes. And I think when it comes to trans people, there's the people that are very far into the spectrum of hate. And I think some new data came out recently. Erin Reed reported on this, trans reporter.
Love her.
Yeah, she's great. I think she reported this yesterday, the day before yesterday. We're still at a point where only a third of the US, people in the US, can say that they actually have a trans person somewhere in their circle, whether in their neighborhood, family, friends, their school, or their job. Like they've come across a trans person. So still 60% of people are going on either perception in media, good or bad, perception in news, good or bad, perception in what the people around them say, good or bad. If you've done some work to be like, everyone has a place and diversity is good, and there's no reason to force people to conform to small molds, that comes through your own learning and conditioning. And that also implies that there's the other side of that. Interestingly, though, only 33% of people in the US have actually interacted with a trans person that they know in their life. 52% as of this poll, I think that came out last week, are opposed or very strongly opposed to the way trans people are being treated today. So for more than half the nation
Right.
to come out and say that's a big deal because we haven't been to that level before.
Yeah.
And those
I'm
who
glad to hear
oppose or
that.
strongly oppose only meet 26%. There's a portion in the middle. They're like, man, I don't know. So that means that really only 26% of the people are really against this, but they're the people in power. And I want to juxtapose this against, there's what we see online, there's what we see in the news, but as a person who's traveled all over the US, as a trans person, I have never gotten a negative comment to my face. I've never had negative treatment in urban or rural areas. Not one. And in general, what I find is while I might see someone and I'm thinking, I wonder how you feel about me, to my face, they operate differently. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean they don't have it in their head, but my point of view is until you voice something to me, it's none of my business. So and this isn't certainly not true for all trans people, but my lived experience has been I can go anywhere I want and do whatever I want. And people just kind of let me pass by because for whatever reason, and by and large, they're focused on their own lives. This sort of rage bait process that we have is when we're by ourselves or in front of our news or on our phones, but when we interact with humans, some of those sort of cultural norms kick back in. Now, they're not going to last for long. And certainly people have really experienced everything from slurs in public to actual violence and death. That I'm not going to say
Right.
that hasn't happened, but
Right. We can't.
the perception is different than I think a lot of but not all, lived reality.
Well, and
You
as
know what I mean?
somebody who I do know what you mean, and I'm fortunate to have many trans friends. And I also recognize my privilege that if I'm not like wearing rainbows, I'm very colorful anyway. So sometimes that just
Yeah.
reads in its own
Yeah.
way.
You can't resist.
I just can't, not in my new life,
Mhm.
like as me as I can be. And I'm very happy about that. But a lot of people just assume that I'm just some cishet white girl, right? And they will confess to me things that they assume I'm on their side about.
Yeah,
And
of course.
so it was just interesting to me that somebody started this conversation as trans people are their own political party. Like they said something
Yeah.
like,
I
trans people
wish.
just need to appeal to the moderates and then everything would be fine. And this is, of course, before we voted, way before election day. And I was like, what are you saying? I think you need to explain yourself to me. Gee, I'm just guessing you don't know a single trans person because
Yeah.
it,
And what's
it,
appeal mean, anyways? Beg for permission to exist? What does appeal mean? Make ourselves more socially acceptable? Do they have an
right.
answer?
But no, not a good one. They said now that trans people have elevated themselves to such a privileged
Hmm.
platform and they've been put on such a high status in society. And I'm like,
What? No.
they
No.
wish. I'm like, everyone wish. I should say everyone wishes that. Unfortunately, but
I would love that. But no, not even close. Not even
and
close.
their perspective was very the sliver news about trans people in women's sports, and they must have
Oh
had a
God.
favorite sport athlete who was being going on and on ranting about how they're losing their opportunity in the sport that they love because of trans people. And we all know by the statistics and all the facts and all the data, and you talk to
Mhm.
any trans person, especially trans women, the change in their bodies and they go through HRT and all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh yeah.
It's if you just know what you're talking about,
On some
that
basic
argument goes
research.
away real fast, real
Yeah.
fast. So it's just obvious to me. And so I just said, okay, I'm getting hot and I hear myself. I'm sorry, Miss this person, but I'm just going to put it to you this way. Just think about this for a second. What if it all evens out? What if instead of there being such gendered sports, like, it could go both ways, right? Like, everyone can play the same sport, and there's gonna be strong people in any gender, and it's not as
Mhm.
binary as we think anyway. So, let's just
That's
pretend it's
right.
binary for your little brain to wrap your head around for a second, but let's just think about how it can actually even out. It all
Mhm.
just becomes about pure athleticism and talent, regardless
Yeah.
of what you think somebody's gender is.
Yeah.
Can we
The
just be human?
yeah.
Can we just embrace
Yes.
humanity?
The wildness of that argument. And here's the deal with why that's an argument. And I'm not even going to jump into the science yet, and I'll keep it short. The trans sports issue serves one purpose. It is a wedge issue. So the idea is everyone can easily get up in arms about like fairness in sport and taking chances from kids away. Like those are issues that always grab public opinion because people feel very protective of that. By the way, those same arguments, including the bathroom, were used to oppose the civil rights movement. They're just retreading the same. They always start with
Exactly.
bathrooms and sports because people get upset
Recycle.
about those easily. It's not a real argument. And it's to get you on the slope where you're like, trans people are taking liberties they shouldn't. So then you're more likely to agree until you're like right in the middle of all the rest of the garbage, right? But the thing that I tell people is look, there are maybe 5 elite trans athletes in the US. And I mean that collegiate level and above. Athletes in that bracket with them are 520,000
Right.
people. That makes trans people 0.00002%
Right.
in that market. So even if your whole argument is it's unfair to women, is okay, you're going to move the needle such a small amount that it's imperceptible. If you're really concerned about fairness, Jane, my friend over here, how about women's access to fair pay in sports? How about women's access to sponsorship in sports? How about women's access to equal training facility in sports? How about women's access to spaces where they're not under threat from male doctors and trainers? All of those would actually move the needle in fairness to sports. But keeping 5 trans people, and by the way, of those 5 trans people, there's trans men, non-binary, and trans women. So
Right.
maybe 2 trans women wouldn't
Right.
compete in a race.
I
Further,
honestly think so
go
much
ahead.
of these like so many of these alarming headlines and little wedge arguments are really shiny distractions
Of
away
course.
from the patriarchy and the dominance that lives in rape and women's health issues, and we can go on about that.
Yes.
I apologize, that's my little
No worries. And,
go on.
like on that, the reality is that I'm at a 4 times higher risk than you are of sexual violence as a trans woman. We don't make women's spaces unsafe by allowing trans women in. That's just demonization. Something interesting happened the other day at an international sport. I think the Olympic Sports Committee for the US said all women in sports must have their carrier type test, karyotype done, right? Which is a DNA test. So you got to give blood, and so they can confirm you're female. The problem this is going to cause, not only is that wildly invasive and men don't have to do it, it runs into the same reason why, if you're old enough, you might remember doing this same test in high school biology. We don't do that anymore for a very specific reason. And that reason is quite a few people find out that they're intersex that way. They find out that their chromosomes don't easily fit into that XYX category. And that's quite a disturbing thing to realize in a classroom of teenagers, in a classroom of college students, right? And that's going to happen in women's sports. And it also won't actually move the needle at all on whether trans people, there's not a trans person competing at elite level enough to compete in the Olympics. There's not. So it's this
Yeah.
whole thing is just like wild conjecture because it grabs people's attention, and we don't read stories anymore. We don't understand nuance. That's why they're so effective. But what we do get up in arms about is kids and unfairness in sports. Meanwhile, sports is wildly unfair across the entirety of the spectrum, particularly when it comes to elite athletes, because the haves are the ones that won the genetic lottery and have the
Yeah.
financial backing to devote their entire life to just that thing. We don't have fairness in sports. When Michael Phelps gets into the pool with other male competitors, it's not fair
Right.
because he wins the genetic lottery. And by the way, Katie Ledecky, the best female swimmer in the world, and maybe the best swimmer ever, has faster times than Michael Phelps in some of his own events. And
So,
out of the
that's
8 events he swims, she owns the world record for 4 of those events, regardless of gender.
that's one of my points as well. It's like, this should not be gendered.
Yeah.
It just shouldn't be. But
I read a really interesting thread maybe about 2 years ago, so I've lost where it is. But when you take a look at the history of sports, like over the last 100 years, primarily when a new sport comes along, it's open to everybody until it gets competitive. And the first time that a woman wins, historically, is when they decide that they did men's and a women's category. And they push the women into the women's category so they're not competing against the men that they had started to beat. Now, there's a bunch of historical data on this. Unfortunately, I don't have the article to hand, but this is a true fact. We create a
yeah,
women's field when women start to beat men
that I
in
think
sport.
part of that story is also, oh, I hate that I'm forgetting her name, but that woman who disguised herself as a man to run the Boston Marathon just to
Yes.
prove that women could run the
Hmm.
marathon, and it's
Yeah, it
so
was in like in the 70s, I
fascinating.
think, or the
Yeah,
60s.
60s or 70s, not that
Mhm.
long ago, and to see that footage of her being pulled away and pulled out and all the anger, even people on the sideline, and it's
Yeah.
seriously?
The
What's
ruthless.
the problem?
Yeah.
Go
the root of
do
that is
this
always,
instead
yes,
of that,
exactly. Yeah. It's always an oppositional sexism that women must be less than men in every way. And that reality just isn't a true fact. Physiologically, yes, there's some differences. Also, humans are 99.5% alike in every way.
Yeah,
That small difference between men and women is half a percent.
right.
And we see women compete at all levels and in different ways. And it's wild that we're here. And particularly what you said, I think you were alluding to, like trans women, when you've been on HRT for enough time, and this is the amount of time that most sports organizations ask for. The reality is HRT changes our body. Yes, I'm 5'11" and I will always be 5'11" at this point. By the way, when I started transition, I was 6'1.5" an inch. Trans women shrink. It's actually a really interesting fact. Starting about year 2.5 to about year 5, they might lose 2 to 3 inches in height
Yeah.
because of ligament shortening and all that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and there was a great study done by the International Olympic Committee. And we need more of these studies that showed that the reality for trans women is that in every category except for one, we lag behind cisgender women at the same level. And that's in grip strength. And then we're even. And the way you need to think about trans women in sports is I am now a 5'11" woman who's about 200 pounds running this giant body with the engine of a Corolla, not a Ferrari. So my
That's what one of my friends
disadvantage,
says too. She's, if you could compare my prior body before transition to my body now, like
yeah,
you would not be worried about me doing
the
any
way I
sports.
struggle to open jars when I did not used to is wild. And that's not like me pretending I'm like, I can't get it open and I need to open this jar. And I'm hauling around a bigger body with an engine that no longer has enough fuel or capacity to run it well. So yes, I have a little bit of a height advantage, maybe over you, but you're going to have better lower body strength, better upper body strength, better mobility. Like it's just wild that we're here. And it's been proven pretty well. And it is such that we need to have more studies. Also, sports studies are quite sexist. You know how many sports studies focus on women? 25%.
Yeah.
75% are focused on men. And most of that data is just applied to women.
Yeah.
So we don't even have a good grasp at this point in time of how far women can go in competing with men because we keep them segregated and we don't study women well. But of course, all women know this because we are just now learning good information about menopause, for example.
Right. We're just now learning about so much about the female body. And it's only
Right.
because somebody dared to do the research without funding, or they somehow found somebody kind enough to finally give them funding to do. It's like, it's just so driven by the dollar that if they don't get the money or the support to study and it's to make a case to study it, it's seriously like,
Yeah.
why?
And now that's even harder. What's the way the government's
Exactly.
operating, right? So
Exactly.
again, that people don't want to investigate and learn on their own. They just want the headline that grabs their attention and makes them angry. They want to hang on to it. And it's really, I think there's a really interesting phenomenon at play here.
Yeah.
When people remember things from the past, we see this a lot like in performance review in corporations. Like people hang on to the thing that you did that they're not so happy with, despite 10 things they loved about you. They will highlight that one thing. And so people will really hang on the things that upset them and they are reluctant to let them go and judge them against all of the good that's happened. And we're also quite a very bad judge at understanding that the way I feel about something isn't the way that everybody else feels about something. We tend to see our point of view as the majority's point of view. And a great point, remember I told you only a third of the country have interacted with a trans person. We know that trans people are about 1.5% of the country. Do you know how many people think trans people make up in the country? 30%. News has led them to believe that we are fully 90 million people. when we're 3 million people, right?
Yeah.
So there's like perception trumps reality when it doesn't match what you want to hear.
Probably gotta change that verb too.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Outweighs. How about outweighs instead of
There we
trumps?
go. That's good. I gotta practice it too. I catch myself.
Yeah. So that's the thing. There's so much data. There's so much to know. There's so much to learn. And if people went through life curious and willing to learn and accept that everyone's different, because hey, even two cis white dudes are not exactly the same.
Yeah.
They have different shaped bodies. They have different career paths. They have different experiences. Lived experience is the most important driver in how you go through the world.
Right.
But by and large, we don't want to accept that because it makes us uncomfortable with something in ourselves that we don't want to deal with.
And I was like skimming through this book of yours again
Uh-huh.
before a meeting, and I remembered this chapter 6 on advocacy.
Oh, yeah.
And part of that, my little year of so writing this book for a trans person, we're
Mhm.
doing another choose your adventure style book. They're using journaling as a way to process their trauma. They're sharing
Love
the
that.
journal entries with me. And then our challenge together is not only processing this trauma together, because we're both processing a lot of trauma together. We did
Yeah.
November was a very hard month
I
dedicated to
bet.
writing
Yeah.
this book. And oh, so we both had to take a break. Now we're both diving back in. But also where was I going with that? Oh, we're challenged with trying to have more positive endings than negative endings. And we decided
Yes.
this last year. And obviously, with so much change happening, it's even more challenging than it was
Mhm.
before. And so when I think of you and I think of this resilience that you're so good at, I know it's not every day. I'm not going to
No,
make you
it's
a
not every day. It's not,
superhuman here.
but it
Um,
does show up. Yeah.
it does. And I just love this how you're talking about how you want to focus on some questions that come your way regarding advocacy and that you don't feel that people have to, but you encourage it, especially in all this intersectionality regarding because so many people in the LGBTQIA community are marginalized in multiple ways. To
Yes.
uplift trans experiences, you must start with BIPOC, in particular, Black trans experiences. Until the most marginalized among us can step forward, none of us can. Freaking love that.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking along similar lines, that is a purpose for this podcast. It's a purpose for so much
Yeah.
of my writing. I feel like if I've got a short life to live, I might as well spend the rest of it doing the best I can to uplift
Yeah.
voices and
Yes.
and be bring up this advocacy. So how would you like to illuminate anybody watching this? What advocacy means to you? Why advocacy is so important, and
Mhm.
especially now, and
Yeah.
how to
So,
do it, how
yeah,
to be a
exactly.
good advocate.
I've been getting this one a lot. I think the first thing to understand is there's being my advocate and then there's being our advocate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being my advocate as a white trans lady in a big urban area and it's quite democratic. There's actually DC has 4 times the amount of trans people as any city in the nation. It's wild. Is different, especially because I'm a person that I'm very comfortable going as myself everywhere I go in my community, in my neighborhood, in my city, and I can speak up for myself quite well. So being my advocate is actually standing behind me, not standing in front of me. It's letting me use my voice and mirroring that back to those around you. I don't need you to speak with me, speak for me. I need you to stand with me.
Yeah.
Now, other people that I know would really prefer if they trust you, for you to do that for them so they don't have to take the risk. So advocacy is personal to the people that you know. And I think that's probably quite true across all the multiple ways someone can be marginalized, from skin color to education to nation of origin to whether you're a native English speaker. It's quite if you look at that wheel of power, there's quite a few different ways in which people can be marginalized. When we talk about all of us, if your thing is, I'm really going to stand up for trans people, then the first step is to take is, A, do I have a trans person in my life? And can I understand that what they need and their lived experience as trans is not everybody's lived experience as trans? Advocating for all of us is different than advocating for just that one person because their point of view is very specific to themselves. So if you go out there because your friend is, I must have all the surgeries and must do all the things, and this is what I require, and you talk about that applying to everyone, you're going to be off base, right?
Yeah.
Being trans, there's a whole spectrum of ways. There's not one way to be trans. As if you read the book, I say that a million times through there. So advocacy really looks like when you're talking about large groups of people, is doing your education. What can I read about? Who can I read? Who's a trusted source that's unbiased, that knows something about this community? How can I learn? How can I deepen my education? And I think by and large, we tend to ask, oh, hey, Laura, can you talk to me about ethical non-monogamy? I don't know about it. You educate me. And after a while, you might be like, why don't you educate yourself? That tiredness of always having to do their work for them.
Read a book and then we'll talk. We'll
Read a
meet
book
for a
and then come back
beer
to me.
in Madison, Wisconsin. And
Exactly. And then we'll talk about it. Like, be willing to find sources of information that are unbiased, that portray that group in terms of what it's like to their lived experiences and how they're marginalized by the group. Don't go read the book that says, no, they're not marginalized, because that book is bullshit. So do your education and then start to enter those spaces as a willing learner. Open up your ears and be willing to learn from those people, but show up as yourself and bring yourself to that. And understand you're going to hear things that the group you belong to in society have done to them. And when they talk about how awful that is, they may not be talking about you. But if you take that personally and you center yourself over their experiences, you're no longer an ally. So that's what we mean when we center a group of people. So in the book, when I say, until we center Black and brown trans women, no one is going to move forward in the trans community. They're the most marginalized group that exists in the US right now.
Yep.
And it has stayed that way.
Also, trans people too. They're like
Black,
right there.
Yeah. When I say Black and brown, both of those groups, and indigenous as well, right?
Yeah.
And I'll say this, as a white trans lady, I've lost little privilege, honestly, right? Because I live in an urban city that's quite friendly to trans people. I'm white. I have a job in technology, so I'm well employed. I have savings. I haven't lost financial means. People are rude to me online, but I still am a native English speaker and a citizen of this country, right? So the marginalization I experience is more as a part of a member of this class and has been less for me personally. And that's a hard thing for other trans people to hear, right? Because we have that kind of narrative of, oh, it's a horrible loss. Yes, it can be for some people. And a lot of that is driven by the other ways in which you're marginalized. But for me, no, it hasn't. And I need to be honest in myself with that, particularly when entering into a space with someone who has more marginalizations than I do. If I, a white trans woman, center myself over a Black trans woman, I'm standing in the wrong place, 100%. And I think the other thing for people to know in allyship is to understand that there are systems of oppression in place that are built into everything the society does, primarily impacting Black and brown people and indigenous people, and they spread. And you have to understand that those systems of oppressions are there, and that a Black person's lived experience isn't the same as your lived experience as a white person, because even their experience going to the DMV is different than yours. Their experience of being pulled over by a police officer is different than yours. Their experience trying to hail a taxi is different than yours. Their experience trying to get service in a restaurant, being questioned whether they should be in the restaurant, is different than yours. So if you're going to jump into allyship and activism, understand where you sit in that circle of marginalization, do your education, and be willing to listen, right? Until you're invited into the circle, and you got to show up with your actions. So some things that people can do very quickly are check out your community. What are the organizations you meet? Start at the community level. Don't create something new. It already exists. So in your city, county, town, neighborhood, If you're interested in being an ally to trans people, is there a local trans organization? If not, join PFLAG, right? There will be a local chapter meeting that you can go to as an ally,
Yeah.
right? Check out
Be
your homeless
work.
shelter. Yes. Check out your homeless shelter and make sure that they have their bases covered. Understand the various communities around you, like work locally. Don't start something new. There's something out there that needs your time and your experience, but approach those with openness and when you hear criticism, take it as a learning opportunity instead of oh, you people are just rude and I'm out.
Yeah. Can't fight. You can't. Yeah.
Listen,
I'm
no one should be
talking
an
to
asshole to you.
myself.
I'm not saying that, but I am saying
Right.
like when you enter those spaces for the first time as an ally and an activist, you're going to hear stuff about your entire community that has perpetrated quite a bit.
Yeah.
And you need to not take that shit personally.
100%. Yep. Yep.
So that's my whole spiel. There's a whole chapter about it in the book. And I even give like a range of people of not at all, never will be allies to like high levels of allyship as a way to think about the gates you need to pass through. And it's all centered on educating yourself.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And part of that education is taking good care of yourself.
Of
And
course,
taking good care of
always.
your heart. The head and the heart needs to get a lot of nourishment so you can be a
Yeah.
good humanitarian and good member of society.
And that's so easy to do. Like I I'm a huge coffee fiend. I love coffee. It's one of my favorites. And making my coffee in the afternoon is a chance for me to take a break and just enjoy that first sip. My kid is really into like 80s and 90s nostalgia. So watching The Goonies with him, watching E.T. with him, we just finished watching Stranger Things with him, like, cause it's all about that, like that
Oh,
80s
yeah.
and helping him learn about the thing he's passionate about recharges me. Doing yoga recharges me. Making a new meal recharge. I just made Mexican street corn for the first time 2 days ago, and it's amazing, right? Finding those little ways to continue to invest in yourself, whether that's journaling, meditating, writing, having someone to talk to, or not. If that's like some people are internal processors, invest in yourself in this process because allyship and activism are hard. They are
Oh,
hard.
yeah.
And over the last 7 weeks, I've had 2 major panic attacks. I've been sick. I've traveled twice for work. I am on the verge of burnout. And it is in those little acts every day of taking care of myself that I'm keeping going. But I also have to reset about every 8 weeks and take a week break,
Yeah.
right? It is okay to need to put time into yourself. You should do that anyways. But as an ally and activist, you're going to need to recover. And there's a reason why we talk about joy in the community. Joy is resistance, right? Me
Yeah.
living my life authentically out there in the world and people seeing that and being like, oh, she was no problem being behind her in the grocery store line. And she seemed really fun and friendly talking to the cashier. Maybe trans people aren't a big deal. That's one way in which we change people's hearts and minds.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you
Sorry,
for being
if you
so
get me going, I'm
vulnerable.
just going to
I
go
love
fast.
it. No, I love it. I'm thinking of even to just yesterday. So I also do some online tutoring to
Oh,
people
cool.
who are not native English speakers. It makes me happy. Right now, I'm, to be honest, not making very much money, but I'm doing things that make me so happy. I'm trying to put that
Yes.
first right now.
Yes.
And then, oh my gosh, I literally had a little art journaling session with one of my students, and I've been hearing nonstop with every student, you make me feel so much better about myself. You give me so much confidence. You
Yeah.
are incredible. You're amazing. I got off my last session and I had given out so much energy to so many other people. My partner comes home and I just start bawling into a
Yeah.
like I am not doing a good job of taking care of myself. Wow.
Yeah.
It
You're
hurts.
poor. You, like me, are a person that can really pour things out. And that's such an amazing gift to give to the people around you. And I think we forget how much we do it.
Yeah.
Right. And when I find a new interest, I always very quickly start thinking, who can I share this with? Who can I share this with? Because that's how I
Yeah.
roll.
Yeah.
And there are just some days when my partner comes home and I'm like, babe, it's been a lot. And I need you to let me vent and yell and cry for a while. And that's necessary. It's
Sure.
no one can maintain allyship, activism, and let's be honest about resistance to what's going on right now
Yeah.
and not refill their batteries. You will burn out so fast in this work that's going to take days, weeks, months, and years. Find something that recharges you and stick to it with passion because you need that passion that's refueled in those things that get back to you to give to other people.
Yep. Yep. I've just been even doing some art for the first time in
Yeah.
decades. I love
Hmm.
that you are an illustrator. Oh, that just is so good. And then I
There's
try
just
not
something
to judge
about art,
myself.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, I'm in the same boat because I don't practice it very often. So like when I'm like, oh, I want to sit down and draw, I'm like, that looks like garbage. I'm like, girl, you haven't drawn in 2 years.
Yeah. Wabi
It's
sabi. That's
okay.
what I
Yeah,
tell myself.
exactly.
I'm like, that's
Wabi
my
sabi.
little,
That's right.
it is beautiful because it's imperfect and we're going with it.
That's right. And if you don't know what wabi sabi is out there, go look it up. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. Do you have any shout outs to anybody that you're super grateful for?
Yeah.
Send them a
Um,
little love.
yeah. You, first of all, for being a
Thank
follower and friend and reading my book and talking about it and having me on your wonderful podcast. I love it. I love the
thank you.
title, Be the Glitter, because that is me 100%. If y'all haven't picked that up by now. As always, wife, who is my best friend, my partner in crime, my co-conspirator. Without her, I, I don't know that I would be who I am and would have gotten here. And I think my publisher is amazing. If you are looking to publish a book, Jen Frank over at Publish Your Purpose is amazing. Just anybody out there doing some kind of work in some kind of way, no matter how big or small you think it is, thank you for doing what you do. We all need to find a way to pitch in.
So, what do you need?
What do I need? A
And how
vacation?
should people reach you?
Oh,
How can we
well,
help you, Erica?
buy my book. Buy my book. You can find me at my website, ericavogel.com. You can find me under the same thing. All of my socials are there, so you can just start there and follow me. And if you just search Erica Vogel, I will come up in the top of the list, which is a wild thing to have happened, but you can't miss me if you look in Google. That's the best place to find me and connect, right? But yes, buy my book. It pays for me to do what I do. And it's really informative. It's for not just trans people, but allies, friends, family, coworkers, everybody.
And it's so approachable. This is not some cardboard sounding book. You've got
Mhm.
all of your personality pouring out onto every page,
Yeah.
expletives included.
Yep. There's some funny stories and there's some hard stories.
You laugh, you cry. There's connection possibility all over the place. And
Yeah.
that's why I think it's just so important. It's not just for trans people, it's for everybody to read. And everyone is
Yeah.
going to get something incredible out
Yes.
of it. Such a
Yeah.
gift. Thank you for
Let me
writing it.
be, yeah, let me be a little bit more explicit. There are, I think, 49 questions that I get asked regularly. So it's a column in a book. It's a Dear Judy kind of thing where someone's asked me a question and I give them my sort of thoughts on it. And it might come with a personal anecdote, but the purpose of the book is to pour you into a direction, not tell you what to do. Right? And I tend to get that across quite well with some sort of story or thought process. But it covers everything from like, how do I come out to how do I know I'm trans to how do I find a job as an out trans person in the market? There's a
Yeah.
ton that's covered and you get a decent amount of my information, some up front and some woven into stories.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm
You're
so
welcome. Thank you
appreciative
for
of
having me.
this. I wish you the best. And I
You
hope you
too.
get that week off that you need.
It's coming soon. It's coming soon. We'll see.